Chihuahua. Hey, today we're supposed to be doing a D&D class talk, or something like that. I'm totally going to do that, but you were expecting that, but, well, Kono Diablo da. Let's see here. Anyway, I decided that just staring into the camera talking about D&D might be a little boring for me and the one person who might ever see this, so we're just going to continue our Diablo leveling journey here while I ramble about D&D for event. Alright. Doot, doot, doot. Turn this, whoops. Let me turn this a little down on my end, because holy shit. Okay, so basically I started D&D with 3.5 Pathfinder. I never got to play it. I straight up never found a human being in existence on this planet to play it with, online or otherwise. Sorry, to be a player for it. I did technically DM for it for my little brother. Interesting experience, I liked it, but still. Way later, 5e came out, I was one of the haters, blah blah blah. It's like, it's so simplified. Tried it, I liked it. It's one of the things that's helping me understand over the years to not instantly dislike things that are different. Until you really understand something, it's hard to say whether or not you would like it. Well, let's see here. On that note... hold on. Oop. That was probably extremely loud. On that note, I do want to say that if I ever could find a group, or a bunch of groups, to play the games with again, I would really love to go back to Pathfinder and actually play it. Like, I like it. I really like it. If you, in your nostalgia, are looking back at it and thinking, like, at least you want to try the system, there's a game called Wrath of the Righteous. Jump on it. Like, it is extremely... what's the... Exactly. It's, I can't think of the word. It's true to its source material, in all its complications and problems. I really like it. That said, it's a little buggy here and there, and let's just say I don't like some of the decisions that are made if you go for the most evil route imaginable. Which, in that game, very different. It's not just kick puppies. It's more of, what if, in a constant state of loss, you decided that there should just not be anything? What if there should be no one? What if there should just not be life at all? Like, it subverts that, and probably doesn't realize how badly it does so. But putting that aside, 5e is cool. Have some major problems with it, but everyone does. Let's just start right from the top of the classes. The basic class in 5e is Fighter. There is Battlemaster, which contains the entire combat maneuver system from Pathfinder in one subclass. And then there are some other subclasses you don't need to know about. That's not a joke. You either play a Battlemaster or you're playing an NPC. That's it. You can enjoy it, it's fine, it's cool. But it's really poorly designed otherwise. The difference between a fighter who's not a Battlemaster and a Battlemaster is... It's kind of like never getting past your level, like, 1 features, but still getting extra attack. Like, it's a little bonkers. I'm not really sure what they were thinking. Like, Champion is absolute wasteland. Like, you may never actually remember that you're playing a Champion, because you still may not crit very often. When you do, you may do 5 damage. But putting that aside. Fighter is stable, steady. If you're playing one, you don't have to think about it. Except in the case of, obviously, Battlemaster, keeping up with your battle maneuvers, which are per turn on hits decisions, depending on what's going on. And there's some nice, very cool little ones, but we'll get to that in a minute. You can pull out a longbow, take 4 shots, and on the 4th shot, go, oh, that was a trip attack, by the way. Also, it was a crit, so it's a double trip. So the damage from the battle maneuvers doubled. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's kind of... If it had just been extra damage, it would have been cool. If it had just been the effect, it would have been amazing. If it had been the effect on hit, you know, you decide after the hit, it would have been a little silly. It is the effect on hit, and you roll for damage with doubles on crits. Battlemaster is an S rank across all classes. It's absolutely stupid. Anyway, putting that aside, I mean, you could basically take 3 levels of fighter for Battlemaster and then pick anything else in the game, including, I don't know, Warlock, and still find use, like, a good use for it. I've got something else to add to that, but we'll come back to it later. I'm doing this off the top of my head. Cleric. Cleric is a shiznit. It's very DM dependent on how obsessed with the gods you are, because technically you don't even need one. Because 5e is very rules light on stuff like that. There's no alignment system, thank God. You just want to cast spells. And spells happen. Like, you don't have to keep up with which god you're worshipping and what exactly that means for your spell casting or what abilities you have during the day. You could think of cleric as just a wizard, not in the D&D complicated sense, but just a general, a magic caster who happens to, be themed after a sort of mage crusader. Because that's one thing that gets lost in translation so badly. People think healer in D&D, they're like, a guy wearing cloth who heals people. No, a cleric wears armor. Metal armor, typically. It's 5e, so this gets silly. A lot of them could wear full plate armor. Half plate is available to basically all of them. Because it's 5e and the strength is a dump stat, that's not a joke, you do have this weird situation where unless you absolutely want to use Great Weapon Master, in which case you go back to strength, you might as well have dex higher than... You might as well have high dex, because high dex is everything. Once dex hits 3, you stop wearing medium armor. Because your AC becomes 15 while wearing studded leather. Hold on. Sorry, my brain. Hit 3. Sorry. Once it hits 3, it gets a little bit weird. Because full plate armor, which you should rarely ever wear because it screws up your stealth, which can be hilarious, but it's 15 plus 2, that's 17. You go down 1, 14. It's 14 plus 2 is 15. That's the reason. So a breastplate, which doesn't affect your stealth rating, is just armor. Versus studded leather, which is 12. 12 is the highest light. Breastplate is the highest medium, barring these disadvantage on stealth half plate. It gets a bit odd. If your DM, merciful be thy name, decides that you can find some mithril, or just homebrew enchanted half plate that doesn't have stealth disadvantage, or you just have something that gives you advantage on stealth all the time, and you're like, screw it, I want the 1 AC. Cool. Otherwise, not that different. Once you hit 4 AC, it gets a little bit silly. 4 dex. With a cleric, you're likely to max wisdom, or like straight up, so it's not that big a deal. I'm just saying. When you think of a cleric, you think of a guy wearing armor typically carrying sword, mace, dagger if they rolled like critical role stats and they have like an 18 or 3 things or something silly like that. But otherwise, it's just a big dude with this. It's just a big magic caster who can take a beating. Um, one day I'll go back and further elaborate on the subclasses on that because they are just the sweetest, but not right now. Okay, Barbarian. Barbarian is crazy. Barbarian uses its Constitution stat as its AC, so you don't have to wear armor at all, as long as you have a con above, say, 13. Which you likely will, but you don't have to, but you likely will. Barbarian works just fine with an oddly middling set of stats, like 14, 14, 14. Even though that's not what you usually want Great Weapon Master and all that because they have to use Strength. They are the only class in 5e that has to use Strength. Because their features very specifically mention, we're just going to turn on the game audio a little bit more. Their features specifically mention when you use Strength over and over again. Which is to say like 3 times. Like, which means that they can't say, okay, I'm going to use a dagger. Well, since I'm using a dagger, can I use my dex stat? Well, no, if you say I use my dex stat, reckless attack doesn't work. Also, you don't get your rage damage. That kind of thing. So I guess really only 2 times at the top of my head, but mind you, I have the book open in my brain, but kind of hard to see the words, obviously. Let's see. Barbarian has the advantage of being the closest thing you would think of to a traditional, like, beefy meat tank, but it's not an actual tank for the obvious reason. Unless you're an Ancestral Guardian, but putting that aside. There's no way in 5e and most D&D to get threat. There is, other than silly shit like, say, the Mercer habit of being like, it's gonna attack the most dangerous target, I'm going after Grog. No, they're gonna attack the weakest. Because that's what intelligent enemies do, and that's what pack animals do. In the wild, kill thrash. In the wild, most animals hunt the easiest looking target. Because getting injured is a death sentence. Like, a tiger does not get beaten up, wake up the next day full health. A tiger has a broken arm for the rest of its, well, we call it a leg, but that's, okay, there's like, okay, this is not a biology talk. A broken leg, and it has to do with possibly weeks, months, oh sorry, broken months of not really being able to use that leg right, which means that it can't hunt right, which means that it probably starves to death. So it gets a little problematic if you pick a barbarian thinking that you'll always be aimed at. Because even if the DM is of the mindset that, ooh, I should attack the barbarian because he's tank, you're still going to run back into the issue of, like, okay, the wizard cast Fireball like twice. Even with that aforementioned thing said, they're likely going to be like, okay, I need to take care of that. Regardless of whether or not they think the enemy just attacks barbarians. You can't get anyone off of them. You can't taunt them. You can't, like, grab them and make them stay still. You can't grab everyone and make them stay still. You can get one guy. This is where it gets a little funny. Because you're like, okay, I take Polearm Master Sentinel Feat, and it's like, cool. You still only have one reaction per turn. You stopped one guy. You grappled on your turn, you stopped 2 guys. They're still going to walk past you after you hit the first guy because they can freely do so. You're distracted. When you play a barbarian, it's more that you're not trying to play a tank in the standard MMO way. But if you're going to compare it to MMOs, it's best to think of it, ooh, is that... Oh, it is. Hold on. Wait, is that Thunder Fury Blade of the Windseeker? Ah! No, I don't think it is. Oh my god, it's Thunder Fury Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. I can't, I can't. Sticky keys, don't fail me now. You have no friends. Shut up, Kane, you don't know that. Okay, you. You may have Thunder Fury Blessed Blade of the Windseeker. Oh my god. Yes, it is. Okay. Basically, you have to if you're gonna think of it MMO's way, you think of it in the oddly enough not warrior because it's a little silly, but in the I guess you could to some extent, but FF14 Dark Knight sense, where it's like you're like I am not here to protect people as a shield. I'm not here to be some hero that stands there being all up in the way. I am here to be such a horrifying threat that will not die. The enemies have to gather around and team up to kill me because I will kill all of them at the same time. Like, which is funny because in 5e, barbarians don't have cleave anymore. Yeah, that's right, and it got a little bit problematic. This is once again where 5e gets kind of strange. Great Weapon Master contained is not only power attack and greater power attack and whatever from Pathfinder 5.8 or 3.5. It's also cleave because it's like if you kill an enemy, you may immediately make a melee attack against another enemy. That kind of thing. It may require your bonus action. I don't remember, but regardless. Let's see here. Point is, you play a barbarian if you want to play someone who just immediately runs in and is not likely to die. Not that you won't, but not likely. If you want to be that guy, that asshole who's like absolutely unkillable, that your DM is like, I'm never going to aim at you, and you're like, that I am gonna hump everything you said at me. You play a gnome barbarian. That's not a joke. A gnome barbarian, after like, I don't know, 7 levels, has advantage on all strength checks, initiative checks, which are dex checks technically, dex saving throws, oh, also strength saving throws, obviously, and then intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. The only thing you don't have advantage on is constitution, which you'll probably have a high amount anyway, and I think you have proficiency in. So you, oh, also sword and board, so you have a high AC. You become a monster that cannot be killed. You don't do damage because there is no one-handed power attack in 5e. You don't do the kind of damage that a Great Weapon Master user would utilize, but you are effectively, for lack of a better term, a problem that cannot be resolved. I always thought that was cool. Because you just think of it, Rage is just a battle trance for them. And you have, like, a seasoned combat veteran, like, a not quite retired mercenary because gnomes live so long anyway, who just rushes straight in and just goes for it. God, you add Shieldmaster to that, and it's sick. Shieldmaster is a feat that gives you something like evasion. You have to use your reaction, but you superimpose your shield between you and the source of the dex save that you're defending against. If you succeed, you take no damage. Well, you have advantage on dex saves anyway. Well, you mix that with also their ability to push things with the shield as a bonus action, and you can effectively gain a bit of control of the battleground. Alright, let's see here. Gotta think. Uh, Rogue. Rogue is Rogue is the bee's knees. Even in 5e, it is just the business. I loved Pathfinder Rogue for how many skills you could get. Well, they're not quite there in 5e, but it's still close enough. Um, what you basically, when you make a rogue, like, one of the things that people don't understand, and I mean, people who play the game should understand, but listen to podcasts, you know that they don't. A rogue is and has never been, a, a rogue is and has never been anything other than a team player. A rogue is designed to be a team player. In 5e, it's explicit. If you want to do extra damage as a rogue, because of course you do, you need that sneak attack. You attack an enemy who is already attacking one of your friends. The exact thing, I'm pulling this out of memory. Someone who did not get paid to play 200 episodes of Rogue and some show. Yes, I'm throwing shade at two different freaking podcasts. Sneak attack. If you have advantage on the attack roll, you may add sneak attack damage. If your target has another creature that is hostile towards it within 5 foot of it, you get sneak attack on damage on the. You may add sneak attack damage. If you have disadvantage on the attack roll, you do not add sneak attack damage. That is effectively paraphrasing it almost verbatim. Which is, anyway, redundant. But point is, that's it. That's all you need to know. If you see you see a fighter getting his ass whooped, oh, you shank that guy. You get sneak attack every single round. You're supposed to get sneak attack every single round. Almost no exceptions. That's how Rogue works. If you see a guy by himself and you're not playing a swashbuckler, you don't get sneak attack. Unless you hide. But here's the thing. If you're going to hide, you have to deal with the DM understanding, like having you have to understand that you and the DM have to have an understanding of where you can stealth into. Is there a rock? Is there a corner? How are you hiding? Shut up, dude. God. Like, are you hiding behind a corner and leaning back over and the enemy is not just staring the entire time going, what is he doing? Like, you're assuming it's during combat, but still, point is. You can be a sniper. You can be a good sniper. It's not a big deal. It's completely doable. But at the base, before you get there, when you're at level 1, your thought should be, can I go later than someone else? Or do I need to immediately hide as my first turn? Like, it's one of the reasons why Assassin Rogue is really frustrating. Because surprise is not an actual thing in 5e without it being defined by the DM. Surprise basically means the enemy does not know what's in combat. It's like, well, I went first. It goes, yeah, but he's looking at you. It's not surprised. Other than, say, like Lanny from TFS version, where he's like, he went behind a pillar. Now he gets surprise sneak attack. And it's like, auto crit. And it's like, y'all are in an arena. You know each other are there. Anyway, putting that aside. Point is, to play rogue is to have an assload of skills, have 4 of them have double proficiency, to eventually almost not be able to fail anything that you have proficiency in at all, and to just have consistent damage that you don't have to think about. They are just good at what they do. You don't have to be good at stealth. If you don't want to play a stealthy rogue, you don't have to. That's not a joke. You could just play a dude who sticks in the front lines the entire time and has a 5 in stealth because he has high dex. You don't need to have proficiency and expertise. It would give you something good if you're trying to sneak around and get sneak attack when you don't have an ally, or to get advantage, because by the way, that's the entire point. Sneak attack, when I define sneak attack, I didn't say, you are sneaking around because you're hidden. No, it says if you have advantage. If you're hiding from someone, you have advantage. That's it. I have played a rogue through a mini campaign. Well, it was technically a full campaign, but whatever. Um, very, very, very frustrating. Not because of the class. Wonderful class, but ended up multi-classing twice. I played a fighter rogue, so I could have rapier and shield and get sneak attack as part of just basically being a bit tanky in the front. If you have people with you who want to make all the skill checks, even though you have them all, let's say you take Scout Rogue, so you have proficiency and expertise automatically in nature and survival. Yeah, a friggin' auto ranger. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Because if the other person calls it first, under most people's courtesy, that person gets the skill check, even if you cut in and go, hey, but I had expertise, why can't I make the roll? It becomes a frustration with other people, which is a main problem with all multiplayer games, obviously, but just saying, if you pick a rogue, make sure the people you're playing with know ahead of time that you plan on making skill checks on the regular, because months of that wears you down. Oh god, stealthing into an area ahead of people. Because that's what you do, only to look over and there's a warlock standing next to you. And it's like, my god. Anyway, Ranger. God, I wanted to love Ranger. I wanted to love Ranger so much. I put so much time and effort into trying to find a good way to play Rangers. Even with the new Tasha Ranger, I really tried. Um, I put together on a... Okay, let's just say this. If you play a Fey Wanderer Ranger and use Canny, an optional thing replacing the, favorite terrain stuff, Canny lets you pick a single skill to have expertise in. If you pick Persuasion, and you have, like, let's say 16 Wisdom, 14 Charisma. So, your Persuasion is 2 from Proficiency, an extra 2 from Canny, which is basically expertise. So 4. 4 plus 3, plus 2 from your charisma. So 6. It's like, okay, that's already pretty damn good. It's like, yeah. Fey Wanderer adds their wisdom to any charisma check. I just said it had 16, that's 3. That's 9. At level 3, you have a 9 in persuasion as a ranger. The issue is I could not justify why I would do that instead of just playing a swords bard. Like, once I went back and looked at what that meant, what they had, which, by the way, they're battle masters, instantly it's just like, oh, why am I playing a ranger? And it's like AC, Bard's AC is the same. Damage per round, it's higher. But they're cool spells, Bard can have them all. We'll get to that class last. There's no reason to play a ranger other than just preference. Like, it is, for lack of a better term, it's the, why are you dating that loser? It's like, well, I like him. Like, it's that. It's the, you must have a preference for it because there is no good justification otherwise. Which is fine. But once again, it's like playing a non-battle master fighter. It's like, why are you doing it? And to be blunt, all rangers are better than non-battle master fighters by default. But that's neither here nor there. It gets a little weird. Because, I haven't gotten to Monk yet. Monk is that weird stepchild issue of, okay, I feel that effort was made to show that we had appreciation for you, but I'm not sure that we did it right. Monk is the only class that still has the the multi-ability dependency issue. Oh, holy shit. That, they had in Pathfinder. A monk must be good at dex, it must be good at wisdom. Their AC comes from their wisdom. Their running speed will not increase without that. So you typically do not want to put on armor no matter what, or a shield. Because they very specifically are not allowed to have them. So it's like, okay, I'll have dexterity and wisdom. It's like, okay, cool. you have a D8. You need that Constitution. And it's like, oh, I guess I'll get Con too. And it's like, so you have, are we doing point by here? Probably not. Like, even if we are, do you want eight charisma, 8 intelligence, 8 strength? Because monk doesn't use strength. Nothing uses strength except barbarian, really, but point is, coffee. They feel awkward to design because you're like, I want to have an AC above 14. Just damn it, you know. Your armor, like you can think of it as your wisdom, like with barbarians and con. You can think of your wisdom as your armor stat. It's like, okay, I want at least a 14, so I have the same thing as studded leather. And it's like, okay, so let's just do a really quick thing in my head. Let's just say you pick the default race that you should almost always pick when you first designing a class in 5e, half elf. Takes the least amount of thought, has the best stats. Um, we're not gonna worry about point buy in my head, just specifically standard array. You put a 15 in the wisdom. Sorry, you put a 15 in the dex, a 14 in the wisdom. Well, it can turn into 16, and then what is it? I don't think snapping's helping. Whatever. Point is, so you can end up with that 16 dex, and you have the wisdom. Well, that gives you 15 AC. Your AC will not go up again until you reach level 4. You have nothing you can equip unless your DM decides you just find magic items that do it. Other characters have options, like wearing shields or being away. You have to be in melee range, no matter what. It's like, well, you have evasion. Cool, doesn't matter. You don't have uncanny dodge that rogues have. By the way, rogues are tanky as hell. Rogues can choose every single turn to use a reaction to take half damage from anything that uses an attack roll. And they take no more than half damage from any dexterity save once they reach level 6, I think. Monks get that too, but only the second one. Monks don't have a way of dealing with taking damage. Tasha's added the ability to self-heal using ki, but you get it back on every short rest. So it's effectively... it's in that weird gray area where it's either too powerful or you don't want to use it at all. Because to use key points, you have to have not spent them. You spend your key points, and this is where it gets good. You're like, okay, it's like, Niwa, you haven't mentioned key points. Yeah, because they're awful. You have 1 key point per level. I think the same as sorcery points. It's like, okay, well, you can use them for patient defense. And it's like, yeah, I can. But then nothing else. It's like, okay, well, you use them to do extra damage. It's like, yeah. But all you get is 1 single unarmed strike extra. You already, as a monk, automatically, just like previous editions, have 2 weapon fighting. But only when doing an unarmed strike. You may use your bonus action to make a single unarmed strike. You add your dex to attack and damage, if you so choose. It has no negative modifiers. It's just straight. Flurry of Blows is you choose to make 2 rather than 1 unarmed strike, which is fine. It's good shit. The thing is, you had to spend a point on that. That point was you not deciding to take the dodge action as a bonus action, which, by the way, I've played with someone who didn't get this right, even though it's in clear text. A bonus action is something you do once per turn. You do not get 2 bonus actions. You do not get 17 of them. You get 1 of them. I don't think there's a single vanilla, like, official subclass that gets more than 1. I could be wrong and I'd be cool, but that's how it is at the moment. What that means is, if you use your bonus action to take an extra attack, cool. You cannot use it then to take the dodge action, because you've already used your bonus action. So as a monk, you must choose to give up dual wielding in order to spend a point. So you're paying to not do your extra damage you get for free, in exchange for having the dodge action. Once again, not for free, just getting to use it as your bonus action. They thankfully get these back on a short rest, but that's just it. It's just it constantly feels like you're paying for things that that were just already there on a class that has arguably low AC unless you're rolling for stats and roll like Marisha did, where you have like 80 something down on the paper rather than 70. They're frustratingly easy to kill. Like, in a normal combat scenario, just running numbers, a monk is nothing. It might actually be better to aim at a monk than a wizard. A wizard might have a higher AC. A vanilla, random elf wizard. Because if they manage to, if they manage with standard array to start with 16 dex, 16 intelligence, 15 intelligence, 14 in dex, 15 in dex, 14 in intelligence. No, it's the other way around. Because I believe that high elves get 2 dex, 1 int. Let me double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Oh, good thing my stomach's not picking up on the camera. Let me check here. Oh, that's not helpful. High elves are cool, but it's not really the point. They start with 2 dex, 1 int. Yeah. So you put the 14 into dex, it becomes 16. You put the 15 in the int, it becomes 16. They cast mage armor at the beginning of the day. God help you if it's an abjuration wizard. That means they have 16 AC for 8 hours at a time. Which usually will be enough for the whole day. Unless your DM's doing the classic, you encounter like 5 things during the day wandering around. Which is fine, but just saying. In your typical sort of, you wander into a problem and you only fight a few things before the day's over, the rest is RP, they basically just have 16 AC. Same thing if it's a, you can have something similar happen with a Draconic Wizard. If you pick, say, a Ladrin or something. But, point is, a monk is typically going to have 14 or 15 AC at levels 1 through 3. They're not going to have a way of healing themselves. They don't have any form of defense they can use. They don't use ranged. They can, but they don't have features that go with it. They can't sneak attack with it or anything. Monk is one of those classes that gets weird too, because you're like, okay, well, could you multi-class with that, take advantage of a couple things? And it's like, yeah. But Monk's really, really good features that make them actually tanky are late. Like, monks get, I shit you not, unless I'm misremembering this, monks gets proficiency in all saving throws, and then advantage against any spell. Yeah. Along with evasion, they basically can just stare at a fireball for the rest of the game once they hit like 14. But look how late that is. Official campaigns tend to end by 14. Like, it's kind of silly. Like, why even bother? Because these are features you'll never get. You know, I never mentioned anything above level 10, because you usually never see that in a campaign. Or level 11, I should say, because I didn't mention reliable talent. But point is, monk is cool, but it's very easy to kill and it's scary. There's Kensei monk if you want to be ranged, but it's a little wonky, and also not a terribly strong subclass. Oddly enough, other than the weird thing that happened with Mercy Monk, with being like, your hands are poisonous, so you heal people with flurry of blows, I'm not sure how. Literally, it doesn't explain how. It's like, when you do these flurry of blows, you can choose to exchange some of these attacks for healing touch. And it's like, am I walking up and just... Mind you, you can only use flurry of blows if you made an attack, because it uses your bonus action, which you only get if you used your action to attack. So you must slap your friend, and then start healing them. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Unless you do... The way you would assume it's supposed to work is you walk up, punch an enemy, and then your friend who's sitting next to you who has been hit a couple times, you go, heal, heal! Which would be cool, but it's just like, why did you write it that way? Oddly, Shadow Monk, the ninja, is like the typical magical ninja, of sort of. That's the good shits if you want to be a support monk. They gain the ability to expend their key points to cause, to be able to cast Dark Vision, Pass Without a Trace, and... Exactly. Actually, hold on. It's gonna go mute for a second. I'm gonna pull this up. Shadow Monk 5e. I really, really wanted to play one of these for a while, and I actually did in a one-shot, and then everybody just freaking left because they were being silly, and then got bored of their own silliness. Like, you're in a cage. You're in a prison. What do? The lock suddenly comes open. And like, I'm gonna kill all the guards. I'm gonna just kill guards. Hey, people are fighting in the room. Let's go there. And it's like, there's an open door. You may leave. I'm gonna go kill the guards. It's like, why are we here? Just to suffer. Okay, they learn Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without Trace, and Silence. Let me repeat that. For 2 key points, just 2, you can cast Darkness, Dark Vision, Pass Without Trace, or Silence. Which means you have a punchy dude who's a normal monk in every way, who can suddenly just go, there are people in that room. It's like they're gonna sound the alarm, and you go, no, they're not. And they're not. Like, Silence is it's concentration. You can cast it 120 foot away. It is a 20-foot radius sphere. So it's a 40-foot wide area with no sound. That's cool. Like, the idea that you just have that. And Pass Without Trace is a +10 to your stealth checks. You just get that. That's a lot of free spells that will continue to be useful throughout a campaign. Dark Vision, usually not, unless you just have a human with you. Like the one human. The one guy who's like, absolutely want to play a variant human, but didn't pick something that could get him a way around the Dark Vision problem. In which case, hey, you got him covered. Which becomes cheaper and cheaper to level up. Because at level 2 or 3 or whatever, it's terribly expensive. At level 15, whatever. Let's see here. Okay, we're gonna move on to a different class here. Sorcerer. Sorcerer is either great or absolutely terrible. As long as you're not pulling like an Orion, Sorcerer is not terribly strong. It's weaker than Wizard. It's sort of screwed in that way where people want to multi-class with it to make it more useful. That said, the subclasses, it has a few good subclasses, and one, like Fighter, well, not quite to the level of Fighter, of Battlemaster, but it has one subclass that just stands above the rest by far. It actually has peers, is the thing, unlike Battlemaster. If you pick a Sorcerer, you have a slightly reduced version of the Wizard spell list. You don't prepare spells, so you just cast whatever whenever. But you have so few spells, it doesn't really make much of a difference. They have a complicated system of exchanging spells they haven't cast yet to regain slots. Or, sorry, Pathfinder brain. You can exchange spell slots to regain points. Points you spend on metamagic. You can exchange those points instead of spending on a metamagic to get your spell slots back. Right, is there anything we're picking up here? Unsurprisingly, I'm barely paying attention to this game. Let's see. Probably nothing worth picking, because I'm just looking at the same. Let's see here. Hey, I got you a thing. Exactly. Your inventory's full. Yeah, well, so is your face. Alright. For Sorcerer, there's a subclass called Divine Soul. Divine Soul is the shiznit. Okay, Pathfinder in 3.5 said that when you have a subclass, you exchange features for other features. 5e was designed, and I don't, I've never heard, I've actually read them saying this, but it's just self evident. Their design choice was that no subclass may remove a feature from the main class. What this causes is subclasses to be a little bland. Like, let's say with Kensei, you would lose your proficiency in unarmed or whatever to gain like all those other things, and it would be a bit better. Well, you can't lose anything, so they can't give you too much. So what ends up happening with Divine Soul is they can't go, okay, you forget how to cast wizard spells, or rather importantly, because it's level 1, you never knew. Instead, they just give you, on top of all your sorcerer spell list, the entire cleric spell list. That's right. At level 1, you know Mage Armor and Cure Wounds. But you're a sorcerer who can cast Firebolt. Yeah, it's good shit. Also, you automatically learn one extra spell. It doesn't count against you. There's a few good ones. Inflict Wounds is in that list, which you normally wouldn't pick because it's melee range, but it's there. There's a there's a meta magic that makes it longer range, but it's kind of a waste, usually. But if you want to pick it for RP reasons, it's right there. It's really cool. But now it's not about subclasses too much. When is Sorcerer in general, if you just want to play a spellcaster, lets you have a little bit of extra complication in exchange for just being able to cast. Wizard, I won't even go very far into Wizard. Let's just say, like, it's so similar to Sorcerer. I mean, mind you, one of my biggest complaints about all sorcerers throughout all versions of D&D that I've interacted with is that a sorcerer also recites Latin backwards and does hand jutsus to caster spells. And then, pulls out some nutmeg. Except one subclass or archetype or whatever in Pathfinder called Psychic Sorcerer, which got pseudo brought into 5e, but not quite right. They actually did straight up seem to try to bring it in a very obvious, like, they read it and thought that was a cool way. Psychic Sorcerer in Pathfinder does not use verbal or somatic components. Why would they? It's like, well, you have to say the spell. Who said that? It's like, who said that? It's like, you have to do the hand, you have to do the gestures. It's like, no, you don't. A psychic sorcerer is a sorcerer whose power comes from within the way a sorcerer is supposed to. They will things to happen, and they happen. They want to control your mind. They don't have to look at you, say like actually go like whoa and do like a spinny finger to cast dominate person. They just make eye contact like a vampire. I thought that was just the best thing. In exchange, they they are immune to, say, silence, but fear or anything that takes control of their character's emotional state makes them unable to cast spells. That's right. You suddenly have a spellcaster who can't deal with fear. It's like you can't get closer to the target, and it's like, haha, I'm just gonna stay back here and throw a disadvantage or whatever. I'll just cast stuff that doesn't use an attack roll. They can't cast at all. At least how I remember it. I thought that was great. One, it made fear much more useful. But two, it specifically made it so that you had a spellcaster who is not a wizard. Finally. Like, who just wills spells into existence because his mate is part of them. Whereas a sorcerer typically is a wizard who just doesn't bother reading from a book. They do the same gestures, they do the same incantations. Like, a wizard knows when a sorcerer is casting a spell. Like, they do it the same way. It doesn't matter. A warlock is casting it from a higher like programming language, but otherwise they all do the same thing. Bard's the same way. It's the issue is everybody's a wizard. But moving on, wizard is very DM dependent. Like as someone who played a tome warlock, if your DM doesn't want you to find scrolls, you don't. So you may go a year and not get a single new spell from scribing because you just don't find them. That's probably the most frustrating thing about Wizard. Oh, if you play an Abjuration Wizard, you're a monster. I'm gonna read this out loud. Abjuration Wizard Bobby. Okay, so check this out. Abjuration Wizard. Whenever you cast an Abjuration spell, such as Mage Armor, you can simultaneously use a strand that's magic to give yourself a ward until your next long rest. The ward's hit points is equal to twice your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier. Let's say you're level 2, which is when you choose your school. At level 2, the ward's HP is 4 plus 3 because you probably have 16 HP. Or 16 int. We're getting there. So 4 plus 3 is 7. You're a level 2 wizard. Let's just say you have 12 constitution. You could have better, but let's just say 12. Your starting HP was 7. Because a d6 plus 1. At level 2, if we take the average, it's a 3.5 plus 1. So let's just say 5. Like, let's be nice here, round up. 7 plus 5 gives you 12. Out of 12 HP, you have an additional, like, comparatively, you have an additional 7 temporary HP just for casting Mage Armor. That lasts for until your next long rest. Well, it's like, well, if it gets taken off, it's gone, not a big deal. It's still cool. And it's like, oh, it gets better. While the ward has 0 HP, it cannot absorb damage, but the magic remains. Whenever you cast an Abjuration spell at first level or higher, the ward regains a number of hit points equal to twice the spell level. That means if you cast Shield, you automatically gain 2 temporary HP just for casting Shield. It's kind of like FF14's tank stuff has been since at least in Walker. Where like stuff just gives you temporary HP on the regular, just as a coincidence, and I really like that. Also, at level 6, you can use a reaction to allow your ward to take damage for someone else within 30 feet. Usual rule, if it's reduced to 0, any remaining damage goes to the creature. You can, starting at level 6, extend yourself, basically your magical will out of your body in front of someone, like doing the whole like saving somebody Piccolo style, and take damage for them. You don't take it, but it's the barrier that was saving your life. It's 30 foot. That's so cool. Anyway, at level 10, when you cast an Abjuration spell, such as Counterspell or Dispel Magic, that makes an ability check as part of casting a spell, you can add your proficiency bonus. At level 10, your proficiency bonus is 4. That means your Counterspell, if you roll it, which is usually an intelligence check, literally an intelligence check, you can roll advantage and stuff like that, but to the point, normally, it's a d20 plus, by that level, 5. For you, it's not. It's plus 9. You can roll a 10 on the die and stop a 9th level spell. Abjuration Wizard is cool as shit. There are other subclasses, you should look them up. Nothing to me is as cool as Abjuration Wizard. It is... You basically are... Or somebody walks into a room and it says, no spells here. Like, someone throws a dagger and you're like, I didn't even feel that. Plus 1 6 sword. Anyway. Point is, it's cool. Otherwise, Wizard is just like Cleric, mixed with sorcerer as far as the basic idea of like, okay, I've got to prepare what I'm going to use for today, decide which spells do I need on my short list. Oh god. Well, not so short list after overtime, but they get like 44 spells. I think it was 44. It's something odd like that. Either way, right. Warlock. Warlock is my baby. Warlock is so misunderstood. Oh my god. Okay, so Warlock is effectively... A Warlock is someone... Oh no. Run! No. A Warlock is effectively a wizard who went to a higher power and said, hey, I know you know how to do this the better way. Like, could you show me how to cast, say, I don't know, Firebolt without having to remember JavaScript off the top of my head? And they're like, what? Also, does it have to be fire? And it's like, no, I guess not, but I'd want to hit somebody 120 foot away and they just go like, just point forward and say blast. And you're like, blast. And it's like, oh, the world runs on high level programming. You just say a command and it just works. Like, a warlock is that. For some reason, everyone and their mom instead thinks that a warlock is someone who has is a cleric, lore-wise, is essentially the same thing as a cleric who is a channel, a conduit for some other being. It's like, there's nothing about Warlock that really implies that. I mean, you can keep it, it's cool, some people really like it, I don't. A Warlock, as far as I can tell from reading it, as a seeker of ancient knowledge, who specifically delves into places he shouldn't go and makes deals with things for forbidden knowledge, who, quote-unquote, may have a master-student relationship with their patron, is someone who essentially is just bypassing the necessity of learning from the standard mortal knowledge base in order to cast spells. What makes a warlock interesting, like lore-wise, is that in order to gain this kind of knowledge, you almost always need someone who wanted a mortal indebted to them. It doesn't mean that, let's say, a giant snake under the ocean goes, I don't like you anymore. I don't like you anymore. And suddenly you can't Eldritch Blast. No, of course not. I mean, if you want that in your campaign and you're a DM, cool, whatever. It's your decision. But as written, that snake taught him the spell Eldritch Blast. What happens is he goes, I will never talk to you again. Or at least I would never teach you again. And you cannot take another level in Warlock until you find another patron. That is more or less the stance of, one, the devs, and two, the basic writing of the book itself. The only thing that contradicts that, really, is their... It's weird to even talk about these in 5e because they're so meaningless. Their... What's it called? Capstone? Their level 20 ability, which is you beseech your patron to refill your spell slots. And it's like, okay, but that's it. Nothing else anywhere else implies that your patron is even involved in your spell slots. But once again, if you would rather it be that way, that is cool, that is on you, that's fine. But it is essentially no different than a cleric at that point. Because technically, a cleric who makes their god mad at them will find that they're going to try to cast Sacred Flame and nothing happens. Even though Sacred Flame technically should be a spell, they're listed as being a conduit of divine power. Now, this gets weirder, because technically you don't have to have a god to be a cleric. But once again, this comes into the... This comes into the DM issue. Your DM sort of has to figure out how they want this to work in their setting. On that note, Paladin. Paladin is weird. Paladin does not require a god. Paladin does not require pretty much anything happening. Hold a sec, is my audio muted? Huh. Well, that's a little weird. Whatever. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure Diablo's not picking up in OBS. Great. Hold up. Gonna get quiet for a second. I mean, it already is, but... There we go. Alright. So, essentially, a paladin in previous editions was a lawful good character who was very martial and had some small spell casting capability, but was very focused on their weapon. 5e sort of rounds them off a little bit more. They're interesting. I don't want to go too in depth with this because this video is going on forever, but in 5e, there is no reason why unless you plan to use Great Weapon Master, you don't need to use Strength. A long sword and shield is somewhat silly to even bother with, because rapiers exist and you're proficient with them. A rapier, a longsword, a battle axe, and a battle... what's it called? Warhammer, I guess? Mining pick. They all have the same war pick. They all have the same D8. That's it. A rapier allows you to use dex if you want to. Because this is 5e, weapons don't have any other differences than that. That's basically it. As long as nothing is immune to piercing or resistant, rapier's just as good, and it uses dex. A dex paladin, which is to say a paladin just starts with like 16 dex and you don't even have to go any higher than it. Will never do like, the ultimate, like, bringing the hammer down Great Weapon Master Barbarian style thing. And that's, if you want that, go, like, play it. It's fine. It's fun. If you just want to be the dude who does support, the dude who runs up, grabs attention, does a good amount of damage per turn, is supportive and all that, like, like, cast Bless and, like, generally just make sure other people are alive and doing damage too, there's no reason to use Strength. You can say that's a problem with the way to design the class. I think it's fine. It seems they didn't expect it, but that's the way they designed it. Trying to think here. What was I about to go on about? Oh yeah, something that occurred to me that I probably figured out before, but, it's time. You would look at dueling fighting style and think that there's no reason to really pick it. Like, it's not that big a deal, it's just 2 damage. The average damage of a d8, if you let's just say round down for now. The average damage of a d8 is 4. The average damage of a d12 is 6. A d4 plus 2 is 6. Or sorry, a d4. 4 plus 2 is 6. That means that a rapier does the same average damage as a greatsword when you're using it. Which is strange. And yeah, the top end damage is much higher. But average damage... which means that you can play Sword and Shield Rapier Paladin and still do, on average, really good damage. That said, there are a lot of fighting styles to choose from, and I wish they got more of them, but they don't. What's odd is, unless I'm misremembering, Fighter doesn't get more of them. No one does. Oh, sorry, no class does. There are subclasses of fighter to get more fighting styles, but you don't just get more of them over time like you would expect them to. There's even a feat for getting them that only comes with it, as if they think it's the best thing ever. I'm really not sure why. Like, not plus one strength or dex or whatever, plus a fighting style, just one fighting style. Which I could never recommend under almost any circumstance imaginable, other than RP, but it exists. Anyway, with Paladin, all you basically need to know is that you have delayed spellcasting, so you start spellcasting at level 2, your spell slot growth is very slow, you don't have an enormous number of spells. That said, Paladins, like Rangers, but much better, have a unique spell list that contains a lot of things, a lot of options that barely exist in other classes, particularly at the same level. Like Summon Steed, which I know, it's like, why would I want that? And it's like, hey, it just exists. All their Smite abilities, which, mind you, this is on the developers. Searing Smite, Wrathful Smite, Banishing Smite, those have nothing to do with Divine Smite. When people say Smite stacking, they say it because it sounds cool, but they're unrelated. Divine Smite is a feature that says when you land an attack, you may choose to do extra damage. You expend a spell slot and choose the amount, depending on the amount of damage you want to cause. That's it. So, coincidentally, there happens to also be bonus action spells that go off when you land an attack, but you have to spend your bonus action casting them. And they have different effects. You can technically get these on other subclasses and such, in some extended spell list, but it's mostly a Paladin thing. Oh no. Good thing I'm not streaming, because I think I just DC'd. Oh, there we go. Anyway. Not much else to add there. Paladins just have the advantage of adding their charisma to their saving throws, and the saving throws of those around them. Oh, we're not going up. Ah, shit. Guys, I think I crashed the game. Hold up. Are you? Are you really? Anyway, Paladin's fun. Also really good for multi-classing some things, but we'll get back to that. Let me think here. What else? Let me check real quick. I feel like I'm forgetting someone, which is funny. Druids exist. Okay, I'll be straight up. My issue with druids is that unlike... Well, Pathfinder didn't really do much of this either, but... Point is, you can't get rid of wild shape. You cannot play a druid no matter... and get a hold of their spell list in 5e because they never made a wild soul... or wild... a nature soul sorcerer or anything like that. You can't get a hold of their spell list in its entirety, or even close to it, unless you play a druid. If you play a druid, you automatically learn how to turn into an animal. You don't have a way to avoid it, unless you make an agreement with your DM that you just do not know how to wild shape. Which they may appreciate depending on the DM. Like, oh, I don't have to worry about it. Then you're stuck with it. You are a transforming, or you are constantly turning into animals or whatever. Anyway, to the point. One thing I really like that they did with later classes, like, Druid of the Land's cool in a certain way, but there's really only, even though they give you an entire page to it, it's kind of awful, the choices you get. They're all Druid spells you already know. It's a prepared spell class, you already know them. It has some good things, but they seem to be things that they should have saved for other subclasses. But to the point, you have stuff like Druid of the Stars. Druid of the Stars says, okay, instead of turning into a wolf, I'm going to turn translucent, fill with like starry points of light and start firing lasers. You know, I am going to change into a different. Like, it's supposed to be constellations. I would much rather you go for colors, but that's just me. I'm going to change to something else. Still, basically, just myself translucent. And make it so. And I shit you not. When I heal someone, I heal for another person for 1d8 plus whiz. If you cast Cure Wounds on someone, you cast it twice. In exchange for just using your wild shape. So instead of being a non-moon druid and trying to use your monster forms, your animal forms, you can just go, I would rather double cast healing spells. Or I would rather have a beam of light shoot out of my hand as a bonus action every turn. Or if for some reason you're being all detective-y, you could be like, can I have advantage on like intelligence and wisdom saves and or checks and saves, I think? It's like, yeah, and eventually you're like, hey, can I just fly while I'm doing that? Also, can that 1d8 be 2d8 on those last two things? Like, Stars Druid is the shiznit. But anyway, I really, really like their subclasses. They're really cool. Druid at its base is just a really strong spellcaster. I mean, that's all you really need to know. If you think of Beast Shape as just a self-cast polymorph, which is limited in power, because of that, it's which you think would be stronger, but putting that aside, it's bearable for someone who doesn't want to be an actual like studying in the woods, you know, druid who's like, I gain my power by learning druidic from the council, you know, the enclave. What is the word? The keepers of the grove. Like, the class is a little too focused on being one guide playing one way, which is funny because the subclasses are so diverse. I mean, you can be someone who summons zombies and surrounds himself in miasma. Not necessarily great, but it exists. Anyway, might as well get down to the last two that are great. Artificer. Artificer is so cool. If you think, hey, it's the guy who invents stuff constantly, you're wrong. Not the way they designed it. It's the way people like to describe it, it's not the way it's designed. The Artificer is essentially a Bard Paladin. You have a reaction that lets you add your intelligence modifier to anyone's checks or saves, if I remember right. But you can't use it as often as say, because it's it's intelligence modifier number of times per long rest, rather than short rest like a level 6 and above bard with charisma. They gain armor and weapons right off the bat. You gain the ability to make any tool, and you gain automatic expertise in any tool that you're proficient with. So if your DM is nice about it, and it's like, okay, you can try to figure out what happened to this guy by using your armor smith, your blacksmith, whatever it is. Blacksmith tools, expertise, and let's say intelligence, while inspecting this guy's armor. It's like, oh, what did this was definitely a bludgeoning weapon. This was not a sword, this was a hammer. It's like, we're looking for someone with a maul. Like, that kind of thing. They're cool. They have a lot of diversity in their spell list, like a bard. They start with Cure Wounds, Spare the Dying. They automatically have Spare the Dying. Let me repeat that. They have Spare the Dying. Some of them need Mending. There's Alchemist, it exists. Not going to elaborate further on that. Armor is so cool. You automatically have ranged or melee, and you can use a short rest or long rest to switch which one you are, and it's stuck that way till then. Both do elemental damage, not regular physical damage. If you choose melee, you become an actual tank. Let me repeat that. I just said that out loud after all that bullshit earlier. When you hit someone, they have disadvantage on hitting anyone but you. You have extra attack. And you have opportunity attacks. You could potentially make 3 different people during a turn have disadvantage on hitting anyone but you every single round with no spent resources other than your action and reaction. Oh my god. If you use ranged, it's lightning damage that does an extra 1d6 once per round. So it's like you have a level of ranger, or sorry, yeah, a level in rogue. Also, if you choose that form, you have advantage on stealth checks. If you choose melee form, you can use your bonus action like a proficiency bonus number of times to give yourself HP, I believe equal to your proficiency bonus, or temporary HP. Which means that you can use your bonus actions to do something during your round, and it's to give yourself, like, more HP that just lingers. They're so cool. Play an artificer if you just want to be someone. If you just want to be basically a paladin skill monkey. Oh my god. They're so cool. Alright. Last, and certainly not least in the slightest, Bard. In 3.5 Pathfinder, Bard was a joke. Unless you had a party of like 5 or more, you probably shouldn't bring a Bard at all. Like, it's one of those things that people vehemently defend, but Bards were terrible. Their damage, their physical damage was low, their magical damage was low, they had stunted spellcasting. Their spell list wasn't great. They did have similar spells to what they have now, but not too good. They eventually learned the ability, it's not that far in, to not have to spend their entire round going to make other people get a +1 to attack. It became something they could do and then continue to attack themselves. But their attack rate never grew very fast. Their magic never grew very fast. They gained almost nothing. They're just not good. It's something you play as challenge mode. It's Pathfinder hard mode. In 5e, it is a full spellcaster, 9th level spells, gets access to everyone else's spells. 2 of the subclasses are full martials. They have extra attack and can wear armor, and use martial weapons. After looking at them, I was so sold on Valor for years, and looking back at it, it turns out Sword beats its ass. Valor gains shields. Swords doesn't. Swords gets fighting styles, which is dueling, which is weird because they don't get proficiency in shields. Or dual wielding, which you automatically would almost always take. Valor gets to use its does get shields, which is funny because if you're gonna play an archer as a bard, you probably play Valor. I should actually check that. In fact, why don't I do it right now? I want to see. Swords is so sloppily designed. This might exist. Hold on. Yep. Yep, they screwed up. Okay. Blade Flourish is 3 options of battle maneuvers that a swords bard can use. When you hit someone, you may expend a bardic inspiration dice and increase your damage by that amount, which means if you crit, you can double it. You add that damage to your roll. You can either choose to do defensive, where your AC goes up by whatever's on that roll, which even at level 3 means you can have up to 6 additional AC for an entire round. Slashing, which means that you do that extra damage you add to your weapon, also hits one other target near your target. Needs to be within 5 foot of you. Or mobile, you push a target 5 foot away, plus a number of feet equal to the number on the die, which doesn't work because 5e works in 5 foot increments. You could say, well, I mean, we don't follow 5 foot increments. It's cool. Good luck finding someone who doesn't DM with 5 foot increments. You may then immediately use your reaction to move up to your walking speed. This means that you can use a short bow. We're going to double check this. 5e weapons. I want to make sure. You think I'd have all the books sitting in here because I have a stack of these things. Short. Yeah, you can use a light crossbow, which is 1d8. Or, honestly, I would just use a short bow. Yeah, you lose 1 point of average damage, but you know, loading. That means for, let's say you focus Dex first, as you probably should. That means 3 times per fight, because you get him back on a short rest eventually. You can just choose with your short bow to do an extra 1d6 damage, and also increase your AC just in case something comes running at you. Mind you, it's intended for you to be right up in their face, but once again, sloppy. But to the point, it's cool that it exists. It's cool that it exists. Unlike Paladin, who can't do ranged Divine Smite because they put it explicitly that you can't do it. But then on Twitter, Jeremy Crawford, someone said, oh, there's no balance reason for it. We just didn't want you to be using range. We didn't think it fit the class. God. Anyway. Point is, if you play a bard, and you are a full spellcaster, you are a mighty behemoth. If you play a swords bard, you can have all your spells be utility spells for the most part, and be a full-blown, in-your-face, like, basically better fighter than anything but a battle master. It's crazy. You make short rests better for everyone. You have an enormous spell list full of all kinds of good features. At level 10, unless you're a lore bard, you get your first chance to take other people's spells, which can be crazy good shit. Let's say you're, like I said before, the aforementioned Valor Bard. The issue with Valor Bards, if you decide that you want to be... You don't... Unless you go Great Weapon Master and decide to go Strength, whatever. You want to be an Archer? Well, you're going to have 5 dex. What's the point of wearing medium armor if you have plus 5 dex? Or, sorry, 20 dex. You might as well wear studded leather, where it's like, okay, what was the point of taking this? It's like the only reason you would take it is the shield. But if you're an Archer, you don't really care either way, but either way, to the point, Rapier and Shield is backup. You can use a longbow. You can be holding a longbow. Use your... Ooh, let's double check this. What is it called? This is the best stuff. This is amazing. Swift Quiver. A 5th level ranger spell. They don't get it till like 17. It takes 1 bonus action. Verbal, somatic, material. You must touch a quiver with at least 1 piece of ammunition. Concentration 1 minute. On each of your turns until this spell ends, you can use your bonus action to make 2 attacks with a weapon that uses ammunition from your quiver. The ammunition is magically replaced every time you use it. This is non-magical ammunition. It disappears at the end of the spell. If someone takes your quiver, the spell ends. You can, on your turn, as a Valor or technically Swords Bard, no reason why you couldn't as both. Shit, you might as well just do it as a Valor Bard, or as a Swords Bard too, if you really wanted to. You can make 2 attacks with your longbow with +5. You just don't have the archery fighting style. Use your bonus action to activate that. On subsequent turns, you make 4 attacks per round at level 10. You get a fighter standing next to you, staring at daggers at you, being like, how the hell are you doing that? You can then take... At level 12, take Sharpshooter. You are a monster that cannot be stopped. Oh, and because of the aforementioned stuff with Swords Bard not needing to use a melee weapon, you can choose to activate Defensive Flourish, because why not? Or Mobile, just to push them if you just feel like being an asshole. 3 times in a row, like turn, and just decide that you also just do an extra D. By that point, it's probably D10 or something like that. It might be D8. Like, Bard has so many options. And let's just say, screw it. You're like, no, I don't want to use weapons. God, I want to use vicious mockery. Eloquence Bard at level 3 cannot roll below a 10 on a persuasion or deception check. Did you hear me say that? You can have proficiency and expertise in persuasion. Look somebody in the eye at level 3, and they damn near can't. You're not mind controlling them, but you put them in a position where they cannot tell that you're lying or really feel that you've got a good point. Like, just from level 3. Oh, also you learn the ability to speak any language. Or at the very least to be understood, I think it was, by anyone. Which is a monk ability. Or just a spell. You know, whatever. It's tongues. It's like, it's so cool. There's a bunch of others, but like almost every subclass for Bard is good. Even the ones that aren't good are still cool, like Shadow, or... It might be Shadows. Oh, that opened. Hey, hold on. Shield it back! You'll let out the Kraken! Anyway, if you ever play 5e and you're like, I'm not sure what to play a Bard. That's it. You don't have to be musically inclined. Oh, did I mention that Swordsbard also gets to use their weapon as a spell focus? Automatically. And they get a fighting style. And they get combat maneuvers. Also, if they make an attack, if they attack, this isn't necessarily good, but they gain an extra 10 foot on their movement speed for the rest of the round. If you have mobile, that would stack, obviously. If you don't, you take an opportunity attack. Unless you killed them, in which case you get to run to the next guy. Bard is so powerful. It's ridiculous. And you're like, well, what balances it? They have a D8 in HP. That's it. It's like, well, Wizard has a D6 instead of Sorcerer. Yeah, I know. They can cast more spells. No, they can't. Sorcerer technically can, but Sorcerer has to give up one of its features to do so. It has to not cast its meta magic, unless they're multi-classing in the Warlock, and that's a different thing. Coffee time! Like, Bard is ridiculous. Bard is imbalanced. It doesn't mean that one-on-one they win every time. Oh no, they can be beaten, obviously. But like, it feels like they took so many good things about the class, forgot that they were designing 5e, not Pathfinder 3.5, and went, oh no, we can't remove anything, and it just has all of it. Oh no, all features. It's so good. The only thing I really have against it at all is that you have to deal with people, once again, like everything, other people being like, why aren't you playing music? Aren't you supposed to be the Bard? No, you could just be this rugged adventurer who's like, I've seen the world and I have oratory skills you would never believe. Because it says that even for a Song of Rest, it says, you may use your music or an oratory speech in your mastery of oration, or whatever it was, to give a speech to cause people to recover more during their rest. God, it's cool. Anyway, that's basically it. I'm done. I've rambled for like an hour and a half or something. Maybe 2 hours. I may make an official video later where I actually script it and they'll just ramble off the cup like this. Mostly I just want to play Diablo 3. Hashtag play Diablo 3. In any case, I'll see you next time. I should probably go eat breakfast. It's like 7 p.m. Thanks for watching. Later. No, I must not go. No. Fine.